how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 166, 3 years in. July of 2016 was when I started this podcast, and here we are, 3 years later. I cannot believe it. I feel like the luckiest person in the world. Thank you for listening and for spreading the word and for reviewing the show on iTunes and for doing all this stuff. It's grown exponentially, and it's because of you guys. So thank you for that. I'm honored to be able to do this. It's an incredible experience. Somebody asked me the other day if I felt the show had changed me at all. And absolutely, it has. It would be nearly impossible to sit down with so many different kinds of people and not have it fundamentally change who I am. I think I've grown. I've learned about who I am by what I'm not, and what I'm not by what I am, and all the things in between. And I think it's made me a better listener and more empathetic. I feel like I see things more than I used to. I notice things, people, and I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but I hope that by listening to the show, the same happens for you, that your ability to see someone as same before other is happening more often than not. That's the goal, at least. Well, this episode is with Hollye Dexter, and she is here in Los Angeles. We sat down here, and her story, I don't want to give anything away, so I'm not even going to tell you anything. No spoilers, although, of course, if you've seen the poster for the show, you already know some of it. But man, what a story. So we'll get right into it. I do want to say that if you or anyone you know needs the services of the Red Cross, their toll-free number in America is 1-800-733-2767. So just putting that out there. The links page for this episode is quite long. Hollye and I talk about so many things from her life, and so I made sure that I got everything on that links page, including some important things that we should all have just for safety precaution. So those things are up there too on that links page. See, still not giving anything away, I hope. HeyHumanPodcast.com. Check it out. That's where all the links are. Also on there is the Amazon portal. If you shop Amazon and do it through the Amazon portal on the Hey Human podcast page, it helps support the show. And that's great because it's an ad-free podcast, as you know, and every little bit helps in that portal. You know, every time you make a purchase on Amazon through that portal, it kicks a little bit back to Hey Human, which is cool. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes. Let me know what you think. You can do the stars, you can type out words, you can do stars and words, which is greatly encouraged. Email me, Susan@HeyHumanPodcast.com. One of these days I'm going to do a viewer mail, so that's coming soon to a podcast near you. What else? Social media, Susan Ruthism for my personal social medias. And then the podcasts are Hey Human Podcast. So if you do a search, you will find for sure. What else? I think that's pretty much it. I know I always forget something, but I think that's pretty much. Oh, I know. If you want to check me out, all the other stuff I do, SusanRuth.com. I'm also on iTunes. I have albums. They used to make albums. You can download me, whatever you want to do. That's under Susan Ruth as well on iTunes. So, but you got your music, you got your podcast. Oof, I do art. I do all sorts of things. It's a crazy life, but a good one. And I just started taking improv classes at the world-famous Second City in Los Angeles. I'm doing this intensive class. I've never had so much fun in my life, at least not for a few months. I say that's a lot of hyperbole, I know, but you know, when you're in the moment, it's the best thing ever. And it really, you run around the room and you say crazy things, and you've got these great people around you that are loving and supportive and wonderful and funny. The teachers so far, I've had 2 teachers so far, Tim for the first week, and this week is Rich, and totally different teaching styles, but I appreciate that because you really learn you learn the same thing differently, which I think that's important. So anyway, rambling on about Second City, but if you ever had a bug in your butt and think, I want to try improv, get you to an airport or to a city that has it, or maybe in your hometown or whatever, but I highly recommend this experience. It's a lot of fun. Okay, and that wasn't even a commercial. No one's paying me. It's just a blast. Enough about all that stuff, and let's get to it. Hollye Dexter, extraordinary human being, as I said. Wow. This one, huh? Hold on to your hats. Here we go. Hollye Dexter, welcome to Hey Human.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Yeah, we're here in Los Angeles. It's a beautiful day, as every day seems to be in Los Angeles.
It is a beautiful day, and I'm so welcome. Welcome to our fair city.
Thank you. The month has flown by.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. There's so much to do here.
There's a lot to do. We'll talk about it offline, but I have a lot of suggestions for you.
Wonderful.
I'm the tour guide. When anybody in my family comes into town, I have all the cool places to go. So
it's funny because I know I've only just begun to scratch the surface, and I'm already exhausted. There's so much to do.
Yeah, I know.
I love it. It's such a playground.
It totally is.
So welcome. You are here because Andy Renfrey suggested I talk with you. And then I looked up your accolades, of which there are many, and got very excited. I love multi-layered people.
Yeah, that's one way to describe me. I'm multi-layered.
Yeah, author, advocate.
Yeah.
What else? Your brother. We'll talk about all this stuff. Your own personal stuff. You were a child actress. You're a musician.
Yeah.
A curator of stories as well, it seems, too. So there's a lot going on in there.
Yeah. I feel exhausted listening to that.
See, I get invigorated. I'm super excited. Let's start. I don't know the exact timeline of things, so let's just start maybe in childhood because that one's easy. You were a kid actor. How did that come to be?
Yeah, well, so when I was growing up, my uncle, who was like a father to me, he was an animal trainer. And we had wolves in the backyard. He had a lion living in his house for a while. There was an owl that flew around inside the house and would perch on your chair. And I mean, it was just that kind of a, your average childhood. And I lived a lot of time there with him and my cousins came to live with me sometimes. But anyway, he later became an actor, and he was Grizzly Adams, the series Grizzly Adams back in the day, Dan Haggerty. So he was doing a movie, and one of his best friends, who's a screenwriter, was trying to cast for this part in a movie called The Wilderness Family. And he told my uncle, I wrote the character Jenny kind of based on Hollye, because he knew me and saw me running around at the house all the time. And he's like, I'm trying to find a girl, that would act like Hollye. And so my mom's like, why don't you, he's like, oh, can she act? And my mom, of course she can act. I'd never acted. But so my mom had me go in and audition, and it was like hundreds of girls that looked exactly like me. It was really weird. But I just acted like myself, and I got the part.
Because it was written for you.
Yeah. So, loosely based on a girl like me,
Sure.
So I did that, which was just an incredible experience.
So what is the show?
It's called The Adventures of the Wilderness Family. It was a big movie in the 70s, came out late 70s. And it was the story of this family who escapes from LA. The daughter, who I played, Jenny, gets very, very sick, has horrible asthma, and there's all this smog. So they escape, and they build a cabin in the woods, and they live off the land. And, something a lot of people might be thinking about now, with the way the world is. But anyway, so it's just their adventures of living in the wild, and just the four of them, and, encounters with wild animals and
Was your
kinds of
uncle
stuff.
the star then? Or?
No, he was off doing his movie Grizzly Adams, because
Oh.
Grizzly Adams was a movie first, and then it became a TV series.
Okay.
So he was off doing his thing, and I was filming mine. We both were in Utah filming on location, but so I got to go see him sometimes on weekends when we weren't shooting. But
It must have been a fun childhood to be around all this stuff.
that was a fun chapter
Yeah.
of my childhood for sure.
How was growing up with a lion in the house? What was that like?
Well,
Can't trust those lions.
Yeah, well, they got reported, and the lion,
Oh.
had to be taken away. But I was really little when they had the lion. But I do remember the wolves, and my cousin Tammy. We were the same age, because I used to stay there on weekends and stuff. And we woke up one morning, and she said, "Oh my God, Dad brought the wolves home from Canada," because they had just gone to do a movie. And he had just picked the wolves up from the airport, like you do when you pick your wolf up from the airport.
I mean, sure. Every wolf I know gets to fly first class, which I
Right,
find
I know.
extraordinarily unfair. But
So my cousin Tammy was so excited to see Aquila, her favorite wolf. And so my cousin Tracy and Tammy were at the back window. It was early morning. We're like, oh my God, the wolves are back. So Tammy runs out the door. We were about, probably about 7 years old. Runs out the door, runs up to Aquila. It wasn't Aquila. My uncle picked up the wrong wolf. Can you imagine that there's more than one wolf to pick up at the airport? He picked up the wrong wolf, and the wolf grabbed my cousin Tammy, lunged at her, grabbed her by the head, and started shaking her like a rag doll. So my aunt and uncle, I believe it was my uncle, it just jumped through his bed because we were screaming, and he jumped through the bedroom window and saved her from the jaws of the wolf. But she had to have all these stitches, and
oh my God.
it was, so just your average childhood,
All grown up now, is she terrified of dogs and wolves?
Oh, no, she's passed away recently, but
I'm sorry.
it was not good. But she, she loved animals, loved animals. She grew up with them her whole life. That was just, it was just a fluke. It's, you pick up the wrong wolf.
Aquila was in the bathroom washing her hands. Or she came out, her paws.
Yeah, that was it. So
she's like, hey, where's my ride?
Right, exactly.
She hadn't been wearing the sunglasses. He would have recognized her.
Exactly.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So
how long were you on that show?
So The Wilderness Family was a movie, and I was on that. We shot that for a whole summer. I was 11 when we did that. And then after that, I did a couple cable shows, and then I was on General Hospital for a while when I was like 14 or 15. I think it was 14 or 15, and I played a pregnant teen. And back in the day, there was Luke and Laura, that whole thing. So I was Laura's, teen friend who was in trouble. And so her mom was my doctor, and, anyway, so I did that for a while.
Did you have the baby?
Well, what ended up happening, because I was like on and off, as a recurring character. And then the whole town was under there was some kind of horrible outbreak of some disease, and the whole hospital was shut down. So then I never got to go in and have my baby. And after
Street urchin baby.
Yeah, so I'm still pregnant with that baby.
Pregnant.
I'm still carrying that little strap-on soft belly that I had.
That's some pretty hot topic for, what was it, the 80s maybe?
Yeah, well, let me see. It must have been like 1979 maybe, or something like that.
That's a risque for television.
It was cutting edge, I tell you.
Yeah. Did you know who the father was?
I think so.
It was the wolf, wasn't it?
Right. I don't remember.
That baby's
honestly.
doing really well now.
Yeah.
It's all grown up. Went to Harvard.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Just got its doctorate.
It said Harry Potter or something. All right. So from that, let's see what happens next. See, I don't know your timeline. I just know all the things you've done.
So. When my kids were little, I didn't want to work a regular job anymore. So I quit acting. I just didn't like it. And then I just was singing. So I was singing since I was a teenager. I was singing in little coffee houses and restaurants and stuff like that. I did that for years.
You've done backup for some humongous acts, and you also put out, is it 4 records? Is that correct?
Well, 2 records of my own, and then I've sung, and then I've done a couple of like compilation records, and then I've sung on a lot of records, like as a background singer.
Blake Shelton, I saw one.
Yeah, I got to sing. I didn't sing on his record, but I did get to sing live with him on TV, and
he's a nice guy.
He was. I have to tell you, it was right when he was at the beginning of his rise. He had the long hair then and all that.
The mullet.
Yeah. And it was like his first big hit. And I had never heard of him, but I got a call. Can you be at the TV station tomorrow to sing with this guy? Here's the song, learn it. And he was just so like, oh, so nice to meet you, ma'am. And yes, ma'am. And because I was, oh, do you want us to wear all black? Do you want us to stand here? Okay, ma'am. It was just so cute. Now he's like huge,
Humongous.
you know. But he's so, and speaking of huge, he's like 6'4", by the way.
Yeah,
he's
very tall.
Really tall.
Handsome feller.
So handsome. And just, he was so lovely.
Yeah.
I don't know what fame has done to corrupt him by now, but
I think he's
sweet.
still a good.
Yeah.
He's still a good
He
person.
seemed like he was made up of good stuff. Like he was raised well, you know, very nice manners.
And he also, I think, brought his own goodness to the table. So
Yeah,
it's nice when, it's like Reba. Reba is the nicest human being. And I feel like some people just, they navigate this crazy fame, fortune, curse.
Yeah.
Well, some don't.
Well, I think I heard Oprah say once that fame will just, whatever you are, fame will magnify it. So whatever you came,
it's like being drunk.
Yeah. If you came to the party as a jerk, you're going to get famous and rich and be a giant jerk. Or if you came with a good heart, and you're going to...
Fame is a gypsy elixir, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it does the same sort of... There was Oprah Winfrey told a story on a podcast I listened to, or maybe it was retold through Elizabeth Gilbert. I can't remember exactly now, but she said she was walking her dogs in the morning, and didn't have the face on, didn't have the hair on, or whatever, just normal person walking, sweats outfit, and passed a homeless man on a bench, and the man said, lady, you look a lot like Oprah Winfrey. And she laughed and she said, I am Oprah Winfrey. And he said, you're no Oprah Winfrey, which she said she delighted in. I think that's such a funny story.
It's funny.
And it speaks a lot to fame, right? Who we really are versus the masks that we have to wear to be whatever the things. And not just in entertainment, I think, in general. The masks we wear to be whatever. Sitting at the Thanksgiving table with Uncle Bob, who's driving us insane, to... our dry cleaner, to whatever.
You're right. Exactly. You have an Uncle Bob too. I think everyone in the world has an Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob just for show. His name is actually Gene, but Bob just rolls off the tongue. I don't know why it's always Bob for me. Uncle Bob. When did your brother was shot?
Yes.
And survived.
Yeah.
And he was shot in the head?
Yeah, he was.
What happened?
So there was a boy that we grew up with down the street. So I was 14 when it happened. My little brother was 7 when he was shot. The boy was 13. We had grown up with him our whole lives in the neighborhood, and we all knew that he had really terrible parents that were abusive to him. And he was just a little off. He was not, he was a strange kid. And he called my brother. It was like a Saturday morning during the summer. He called my brother into the house. He said, I want to show you something. And my brother, 7 years old, went into the house, and he took his father's gun out and he shot my brother in the head.
Accidentally, the gun goes off, or he shot him in the head like, look what this gun does?
My brother said the last thing he remembered Dean saying to him was, it's loaded. So, we went through a whole... And then after it happened, we of course I had to hold my brother. We grew up with a single mom. So my mom was like rushing, to the ER, and I was holding him, and he was losing consciousness and bleeding out. And I mean, it was intense. And while this was happening, we had no idea what was happening on our street. He and his mother, the shooter and his mother, had barricaded themselves inside the house. There was the SWAT team, there were helicopters. It was a day-long standoff, and finally they got him to come out. Then when we ended up going to court, it took, a year, I don't know, something like that. And all the while my brother's having surgeries and going through physical therapy for brain injury. And they ended up saying, kids will be kids. It was just an accident. And
he's now in the Supreme Court. No.
Right. Oh, God.
No.
Yeah.
Joke.
No, but he did end up a couple years later being in juvenile hall for something else. So, I mean, it was just
environment
a nightmare.
Does not help an upbringing when it's when you come to the table already with violence and things. How was the recovery for your brother?
He's had a really difficult life. You know, whatever life he was going to have was ended that day because he lives with traumatic brain injury, seizures. You know, if you heard anything about like traumatic brain injury, our soldiers that come home from Afghanistan, they have like emotional, like not only PTSD, but also physically because of brain injury, they can have crying jags, they can have rages, they have like unstable mood swings, they tend to self-medicate, you know, and so all of that we've been dealing with for 40 years.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's been really hard. The bullet is in his head still.
Oh.
They were not able to get it out.
Oh, because to dislodge it would mean brain bleeds and things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's been living with a bullet in his brain his whole life. So, you know, that's not a good way to live. So it's been rough.
Does he live here in California?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does.
And he understands what's happened and all that.
Yeah, he understands. But it's been, you know, he's struggled a lot, and I wonder, you know, what his life would have been like if he didn't have that struggle. You know, there are certain struggles that might make you stronger, you know, and you might overcome, but you can't really overcome living with a bullet in your brain, you know. There was a certain amount of what's called neuroplasticity because he was so young that his, you know, first he really was like walking, dragging his leg. He couldn't use his right hand at all. But I was out late last night.
No,
my husband had a gig and I'm like so scratchy.
No, you're fine.
But anyway, he, you know, he learned to get all that back because of that neuroplasticity. And so he functions pretty well. He doesn't have like a lot of feeling in his right hand. He had to learn how to write with his left hand.
So he was shot on the left side. Isn't it opposites?
Yeah, he was shot left side of the brain, yes. Yeah. So luckily it didn't affect his speech or anything. He's a little bit slurry, a little bit, but you know, anyway, yeah.
How did that shape your eventual coming into advocacy for gun control?
You know, the thing is, like, growing up with a single mom, and she worked nights, and she was just, like, doing everything she could to just keep us going after that, you know. She didn't have any support, and, you know, it was really hard. So we just didn't talk about it. And then as years went by, she didn't want to talk about it, because it was just too painful. It was like, let's just not look back. Let's move forward, you know? So I never talked about it, and I sort of internalized the message that I shouldn't talk about it, which I really didn't. And then when Sandy Hook happened, and I heard that there were, I will get emotional saying this, but I heard there were, 20 first graders that had been slaughtered with guns. I just was flashing on my brother, who was a first grader, missing his 2 front teeth, bleeding, all blood dripping off his eyelashes down his face. You know, I mean, just the nightmare of that.
Your own PTSD.
Yeah, and I know what a child who's been shot looks like because I've held that child in my arms, and I just said, that's it. Like, I have to do something, and I have to talk about it. And so for the first time, I wrote I wrote a whole essay about it, and it ended up getting picked up and kind of went viral. And I mean, I had people like reaching out to me saying, I've known you for 20 years. I didn't know this had happened to you. Like, I didn't even know. And I said, well, you know, I don't bring it up at cocktail parties. It's not appropriate at play dates. You know, like, it's just, you know, it's a hard, and part of me was like, I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings by telling them my horrible story because I just knew it would upset people to hear it, you know? So I just didn't really talk about it for a long time. Now I talk about it constantly. I testify in front of legislature, and I write about it, and I go out and I give speeches at schools and churches and synagogues, and you know, so now I talk about it a lot. So I came out with my story after Sandy Hook, basically. So that launched a whole unexpected turn in my life, and just something I never thought I would be doing. I'd already been writing books then, and so then it was like, oh, you know, hard right turn right now, you know.
Mm-hmm. Did you find more backlash or support when you came out with your story?
Well, support from all the people that know me and that matter. And then, of course, there's a lot of crazy loons out there that love guns more than people that, you know, I mean, I've been threatened and called names and, you know, whatever. You know,
mm-hmm.
People in, you know, and living in their mother's basements are going to hate, you know. So
yeah, they don't even have to live in their mother's basement, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
It is curious to me how little people really truly understand about what owning a gun means, the responsibility of owning a gun, and including safety,
right,
which is paramount, obviously.
Right. And that's what I teach, is safety.
Yeah, and I think that there's this rhetoric that by saying, hey, you know what, these kids are getting shot, and this is something to talk about and to help control mentally ill people who get guns and people with history of domestic violence who get guns and all this stuff. Nobody's trying to take away law-abiding citizens' guns.
Right.
And in fact, that would be a nearly insurmountable task anyway.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the president doesn't get to make that choice, which I don't know why they always say President so-and-so is for or against. And it's like, so?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, if you wanted to change the Second Amendment, you would have to have 2/3 of Congress would have to vote on it, and then 3/4 of the states would have to ratify it. I don't see that happening in my lifetime. That's A. B, let's say we did make that happen. Who's going to confiscate the guns? Like our underfunded police department, our overstretched military? Like, who's going to do it? President Obama himself, Hillary Clinton herself is going to go. A bunch of angry moms are going to come to your house with T-shirts on and be like, give me your guns. Like, you know what I mean? It's so silly.
It worked in other countries, but other countries are smaller, less people.
And had way less guns, way less. We have more guns than people in this country.
Yes, it is. So. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. Do you ever go shooting guns? I'm curious.
I don't, but I did as a child.
Yeah.
My mom had a boyfriend that I didn't care for a while, and he was a gun enthusiast, and he taught us how to shoot. And so I do know how to shoot guns. I learned. And...
It's a good skill for the coming apocalypse.
Oh, God. Yeah, so I do know how, but I just think... I'm focused on, let's look at education. Let's look at creating peace in our communities. Let's look at how we communicate with each other, educating our youth about, the risk versus benefits of guns and what they do. I mean, I think eventually we're going to have to see some autopsy pictures. People are going to have to see what guns do, maybe,
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think a lot of people who have guns, all they have to go by is theory. They're theoretical in their gun ownership.
Yeah.
When you own a gun, you have to understand that just like when you own a car.
When you own a car, when you have a pool, you have to understand that you should have a gate so children don't get into it and drown. They're just certain things. It's just, if you have a gun, that's fine. I mean, my husband has all this family in Kansas, and they have hunting properties, and that's fine, But not only here in LA, especially, do you want to keep your gun in a safe because you don't want a child getting a hold of it, an impulsive teen. Like 2/3 of school shooters got their guns from the home. You don't want...
Hormones are a bitch, yo.
Hormones are a bitch, and and suicide is on the rise with teens.
Sure.
And so you don't want a sad teenager to get a hold of your gun.
Who doesn't have forethought. And that's the thing, and not even many adults have the capacity to see past whatever they're in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
If your whole life is in that moment.
Right. And that's, their brains aren't developed yet to understand consequences. That part of their brain that really understands the outcome of a decision. It's not developed yet. So anyway, you want to keep your guns in a safe. And also because in LA, guns are harder to get. And so the way they get crime guns, most of the crime guns in LA are stolen.
From people's homes.
They will break into your home, and they will not care about your computer or your jewelry. They're looking for guns. So, and they especially target, we have a couple of police officers on our board of directors. I'm on the board of directors for Women Against Gun Violence. And we have some police and sheriffs on our board. And they said the houses that have like the Gadsden flag or a POW flag or, anything military related or, warning, gun owner, that don't trespass, like anything like that, those houses get hit the most because it's like saying, I have a gun. So they're like, yay, thank you. We're going to break in there first,
Yeah.
So anyway, guns.
Yeah, guns. How did you meet your husband?
Oh gosh. Did you ever hear that song? I was working as a waitress. And that's pretty much how I met him. I thought I was working as a waitress at L'Express in Sherman Oaks, which was like the hipster place to hang out in the 80s. And he used to come in there after gigs because it was a French cafe, but it was open till 2 a.m. It was like the hang that everybody would go to after clubs or whatever. And I thought he was somebody else that I had just met like 2 weeks before. And I was like, oh, hey, hi, how are you doing? You know? So
he's like, man, this chick is friendly.
Right. Then he's like, yeah. And I said, I know you. I'm Mitzi's friend. Remember, we went to such and such last week. I met you when we were with da-da-da-da. You know, and he was like, nope. I'm sorry. I was in Australia last week. And so I was just like beet red and totally embarrassed. Sorry, bye. Just walked away.
It's a great pickup idea.
Yeah.
I hope you're all taking notes, listeners.
Yeah, so anyway, it's a longer story than that, but we ended up becoming friends, and we were friends for like 6 months before we ever admitted feelings for each other. So we were just buddies. We hung out, we went to the beach, we took vacations, we went out to lunch all the time, we'd work out at the gym together. We were just buddies. So
with sexual tension.
Well, yeah, there was definitely that Ross Rachel tension going on.
It was a juice box.
Right, exactly.
So he's a professional musician, obviously.
Yes, he is.
And singer, guitar. What does he do?
Well, he's mostly a guitar player and keyboard player. So I was at his gig last night. He played last night. His original band does like really cool kind of funky soul jazz, you know, great stuff. And so that's his love. But he also makes a living as the keyboard player for Wilson Phillips. So he's been with them for like 12 years and does a little just light touring, like a weekend here, a weekend there, maybe 2 times a month.
Great singers.
Oh, they're great.
Those voices.
Not only great singers, but, you know, we've been in their, you know, quote unquote family for, I guess it's been about 12 years now, and we've all raised our little kids together. They're all the same age, and they're just family people. They're great girls, really nice people, and, you know, you get to know people when you're on the road, and they're good people.
Now,
really good.
Is it China that's married to
Billy Baldwin?
Yeah, and he's a pretty conservative guy, right?
No. No, you're thinking of Stephen.
Is it Stephen? They all look so much alike.
Okay, so Billy and Alec Baldwin are on the same page politically. And if you follow Billy on Twitter, he's funny, but he's very political and he's very progressive.
Okay, so I was thinking, gosh, that must be interesting if you're with the one that is super conservative.
That's Stephen.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall in those commercials. Conversations.
Thanksgivings are intense for the Baldwins, from what I understand.
That's why God
from
created
what I've
THC,
heard
friends.
from Billy. Yeah.
Wow. So. When I'm filling in because just again I don't know the timeline. So when you were married and a fire breaks out in your house.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so that's what my book Fire Season is about. So I'd been married like 5 years, I think. So we were young in our marriage and we had 2 kids. Our daughter was at a sleepover. She was not home that night. And our son, who was 4 at the time, was. And you know, I woke up that day. So he had a recording studio in the house, and I had a children's clothing line we had like this tri-level house up in the hills, and the bottom level was just my clothing line. It was all centered down there, and it was a national line. It was in Barney's, New York. It was in Fred Siegel. It was, you know, all over the place. And
what was it called?
It was called Coochie Coo Zoo. It was a little
cute,
little funky little kids line with like really outrageous. Like we did these little Audrey Hepburn swing dresses with like leopard collars and a little leopard muffin hat, and just, you know, really out there fun stuff. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so that night, you know, we went to bed. I was a business owner. He was a studio owner and producing albums and stuff for other artists. And I had this bad feeling that whole day, like just this pit in my stomach. And I'd had a really bad dream the night before that I had lost everything in my life. But I dreamed that I was tumbling backward down a hill, and all my possessions were tumbling with me. but they crushed me at the bottom and I lost everything. And I woke up crying and I woke Troy up and I was like, oh, I had this horrible dream. He's like, it's a dream. Just relax and it's fine. Don't worry. It's okay. And that whole day I just felt sick. And that night, I had the hardest time going to sleep. I finally did fall asleep. And then I woke up with this voice in my head just saying, check the baby. I was like, ugh. So I got up and I went and I checked on Taylor, who was 4. It's his birthday today, by the way.
Happy birthday, Taylor.
So I checked on him and he was fine. And okay, I don't know what's bothering me. I went and I checked on my dogs who were like in the kitchen behind a little safety gate. And they were fine. And then I went back to bed and an hour later woke up, checked the baby, checked him. He was fine. Hour later, same thing happened, but the last time that I woke up, I was really groggy. And the house was smoky, but we had the fireplace on that night. It was freezing cold. And you know how sometimes if it's freezing cold and you light a fire, some of the smoke backs into the house, and I just thought that's what it was. What I later found out what was happening is the house was already smoldering inside the walls, and we were all inhaling carbon monoxide. So I felt like I was drugged the third time I woke up. And I kept trying to wake up, but I kept falling back asleep. I was trying to wake up and I couldn't. And the voice got louder in my head. And so I pushed myself up. I was like bouncing off the walls to get to him. And then I went in and I checked him and he was fine. And I just collapsed in the bed with him, And then the next thing I remember is my husband screaming my name and screaming for me to get out of the house. Get out of the house, get out of the house. And, for me, I just was like, I heard his voice, I heard the panic, so I jumped up, I opened the door to run to him, and then that's the backdraft, blew me back, knocked me to the floor, and, I just had a moment of thinking, this is it, this is it. And and it was really like in the movies, like that moment where time slows down, and I'm just like staring at the ceiling, and I'm like, wow, this is so weird. Am I going to die? I thought I'd live long. Like I'm having these thoughts, And then I looked over and I saw my son laying there, my 4-year-old, and his arm is just like limp over the edge of the bed. And I don't even remember, but next thing I remember, I'm like kicking the window out. I've got him in my arms.
The mom adrenaline.
Thing. Yeah. People are like, oh, so you were so smart to think, I was like, I think what? Like, I don't
survival.
Even, so, yeah, so then it was a second story window and there was concrete below, and
the firemen weren't there yet. Fire people.
No, the firemen didn't get there for 20 minutes. They couldn't find our house because we were like way up on this windy, kind of like where you are now. So but I think they have better GPS now than
I'll get an extinguisher tomorrow.
Yeah, please get your carbon monoxide.
I have those. I have one. Yeah.
I tell everybody, get your carbon monoxide detectors, because we had smoke alarms, but by the time I heard them, it was too late.
Yeah, big fan of the carbon monoxide alarm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I ended up knowing I was going to have to drop my 4-year-old son out of a 2-story window onto concrete, and I couldn't hold him because my weight would have crushed him if I jumped holding him, and I was going to have to I was holding him by his fingertips out the window.
Is he conscious at this point?
He woke up then. He was conscious, but not making a sound, because I think he was really groggy. And at this point, literally the backs of my legs are blistering, and I'm holding him down.
So there's active fire behind you.
Room. Yeah. Yeah. And my ear was already like charred. Like if you've ever left a hot dog on the grill too long, that's what my ear looked like. And I had burns on my back and my legs. And I'm holding, and I'm like, I have seconds here, and I couldn't breathe, because when I opened the window, all the smoke and the fire was attracted to the oxygen, so it was coming toward me, and the smoke was
taking all your oxygen,
taking all the oxygen. Yeah. So I knew I had seconds, and I knew I was gonna have to drop him, and I was screaming for my husband, and I heard my husband say he was gonna jump from his window, because we couldn't get to each other because our hallways were on fire. Which thank God.
Dogs going insane at this point?
They were gone.
They already passed
from the carbon monoxide.
No, that's at least mercy.
Yeah. Horrible. That was the hardest thing to get over, honestly. That was the hardest part. So then I heard my husband jump, and I heard his body hit the concrete, and I kept screaming his name, and he didn't answer. I later found out it was because it knocked the wind out of him. He fell on his back, and it knocked the wind out. He couldn't respond. But by the time I had to drop my son, he was there and he caught him.
Oh, Jesus.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. And were you okay?
Well, you know, I used to not be able to talk about this until I wrote the book, and then I had to read the story at a lot of like writers' conferences and things, and I would cry and my knees would shake. But now I've told it so many times that I can say it. I mean, I have tears in my eyes, but I can say it now without completely losing
My
it.
heart is pounding right now.
Yeah. It was intense. It was the most intense moment of my life. I mean, the moment of like, am I going to have to the most counterintuitive thing in the world, drop my child onto concrete out of a burning building, you know, like.
So do you remember your leaping from the window?
Yeah, then after Troy screamed, I got him, and I heard him, and then I couldn't see because the black smoke was just coming all around me out the window. I couldn't see anything, and I lowered myself out and let go, and I do remember like the thwack, you know, the hit, my bones hitting like my hip, which has been, and I broke my tailbone, and I was severely bruised, but alive. And, you know, I've had some chiropractic issues over the years, but, you know, I couldn't believe when my husband helped me up after I was in shock, so I didn't feel the pain of what I had done. And he pulled me to my feet, and we just kind of looked at each other like, what the hell is happening? And, oh my God, are we alive? Like, you know, it was just like this moment of looking at each other like, what? And then the windows started blowing out because like the gas and, you know, gas lines and everything.
Oh, sure.
So we just ran, you know, and, you know, then neighbors started coming out with their little garden hoses, and then they're looking at it. They're like, oh, this isn't going to do anything. You know, it was an inferno, 3 stories tall. So,
how long till the fire department?
It took them 20 minutes to get to us, and by the time they got there, everything was gone. And we tried to get back in to try to get the animals, but they were downstairs. We were upstairs. By the time we jumped out, the downstairs was just completely engulfed.
What started the fire?
Well, they said it was wiring inside the walls. Like the lights went out in the living room, and we went to reset what's it called?
Breaker.
The breaker. And it kind of made a zzz sound. And so I just said to Troy, like, leave it. Let's just leave it off. We'll call an electrician in the morning. I don't know what's going on. You know, something happened in that moment, but how could we have known, you know? So I was like, wow, that was weird. Just don't touch it. Just leave it, you know, thinking we were fine. And somehow, this is what they think. They think, because we had like arson investigators come to see us in the hospital and asking us all these questions. Do you have any enemies? Would anybody want to burn your house? I was like, God, I hope not. But what they later determined was that like a spark had flown inside the wall, landed on a beam, and just smoldered for hours and hours and hours. And so they said, you went to bed in a burning house, but you didn't. Your house was on fire when you went to bed, and you just didn't know it.
Oh, fuck. The metaphor, as a songwriter, right now I'm like, there's about 8,000 songs I want to write in this second.
Good, take it, go with it. Use this as your writing prompt for the day.
But just the metaphor of that is what is it like to see everything you own vanish like that, other than the corpus of you and, you know, the family?
Well, in that moment, I was hysterical. And I was so much in shock and so hysterical that I kept freaking out about my daughter. And my husband kept grabbing my shoulders and shaking me. She's not there. She's not in there. I'm like, where's Christy? You know, I was crazy. But mostly I was freaking out about the animals. Once I realized my daughter wasn't in there, I was just freaking out about the animals. I was just freaking out about that. I wasn't even thinking about, you know, my business or my sofa, you know, my paintings, the masters of our first album we had just spent 2 years working on, you know, like I didn't even think about that. I was just worried about the animals. But then, you know, the next day, the hospital, you know, they said, okay, well, they had us all patched up. They had Troy on crutches. They said your carbon monoxide levels, our son had carbon monoxide poisoning too. They said your levels are good, you know, you can go home. We were like, what?
What does that even mean anymore?
We have these hospital gowns. Like, we don't have car keys. We don't have a license. We don't have shoes. We don't have a toothbrush. Like, we had nothing. And so we were just, what do you do? What do we do? And we realized at that moment we were homeless and jobless. And the day before we had, we were two entrepreneurs with a great place and two kids and just living the dream, And the next day we were homeless and jobless. And that was it. And so it was like we had this blank slate in front of us. It's like, what do we do first, And we just had to figure that shit out because we didn't know anybody who had been through that. And it was before all these horrible fire seasons we're having now. Welcome to California. You'll see soon, I'm sure, sadly. I didn't know anyone who had been through losing anything in a fire. And I kept asking people, does anyone know anyone? Because I don't know what to do first. I don't know how to get a birth certificate. I couldn't get into my bank account. I didn't have any ID. I didn't know how to reestablish ourselves in the system and get birth certificates and social security cards and driver's licenses and just, all that stuff. We didn't have anything. We were a blank slate.
Was there support around you to help?
I will say my mom stepped up and let us live. The four of us were living in her guest room for a couple of months, 3 months, which was awkward because my mom and I have struggled, and we do better when we have some distance between us. But we needed someplace to live after we got out of the hospital. So, and then, support. Oh my God, the music industry. I mean, so we didn't have insurance. I don't know if I mentioned that. We didn't have fire insurance. In fact, I had just applied for fire insurance, but I had to send in the first payment and I was waiting for some money to come in to send it in. So when the house burned down, my fire insurance application burned with it. So nothing was insured. And I thought we were
the house of irony. Keeps exploding.
I know. There's another song title.
Yeah.
So I couldn't believe the music industry. Our friends, over all these years, you do 1 million gigs and you meet people here and there and you just know all these great people and you kind of forget how many people you know. And then, word spread, I hate to use the analogy wildfire, but word spread. And this was before the internet. And everybody was calling each other. Did you hear about the Dexters? Oh my God, da, 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 da. And before you knew it, we had them putting together a benefit for us at the old Palomino, which is where Linda Ronstadt used to play. It's not there anymore, but they put together this beautiful benefit. And then churches and synagogues, people that we knew that went to churches and synagogues, they came over with all this donated clothing and I've got a couch. Hey, I've got an extra refrigerator in my garage. I've got this. I've got that. Everybody had stuff they were donating to. It was amazing. It was overwhelming to be the recipient of that much. The love was great, but to be the recipient of that much giving when that's my job. That's what I do.
But it's a measure of a life well lived because people will be in kind to how you are.
Yeah.
It speaks to your goodness that people rose to the occasion. And human beings, we see a lot of the crap we do, but ultimately I think when one of our own is hurting in general in our community, we step up. Maybe not in communities across the world because that doesn't feel like our tribe, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hopefully that will change someday. But
yeah.
It's beautiful.
It really was beautiful. And it reminded me, and I wrote this in my book, when I saw, we pulled up to the Palomino that night for the fundraiser, and I saw all these people waiting in line to get in. And I just sobbing. Mm. And I saw all my musician friends with, their guitars and their horns and everything strapped over their backs, waiting to get in. And it was like an Amish barn raising, it was like they were going to help us re-erect the framework of our lives. And it was just, getting emotional thinking about it. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. But musicians are cool people. That's what I have to say. So
I'm in with you there.
Yeah.
What about your business? How did that?
It was a goner.
It's a goner.
Yeah, my computers, my records, all of our patterns, just everything. And we were already in debt because that was the same year as the 1994 earthquake in California. And so when the earthquake hit, that we couldn't ship anything because freeways had crumbled and all this. And all of our accounts, like on the East Coast, they were like, if it's late, we're going to have to cancel. And sorry about your earthquake, but, So, I mean, we didn't even have water lines. Like, water mains had broken, freeways crumbled, UPS wasn't working. And so we lost a lot of money that year. And so we had to take out a loan to bounce back from the earthquake, and then we had the fire. So an earthquake and a fire in 1 year.
An uninsured fire.
Uninsured fire, my fault for not, sending that stuff in sooner. But because, like I said, we were broke and we were trying to borrow money so I could even send in the insurance.
I wouldn't use the word fault. It's just the circumstance.
Yeah, it was the circumstance. But, make sure if you're renting, folks, get renter's insurance.
Yeah, I'm renting here. So.
Get renter's insurance.
My housemate / landlord, she lost everything in the Malibu fires. Her house burned to the ground.
Okay.
So
she knows.
Yeah, and my friends in Tennessee, the Currys, their house burned to the ground, and Smith is in the music industry, and we all rallied, and they rebuilt their home that way. So it does... Yeah. People will show up.
Yeah.
How does when I was in the floods in Nashville,
mm-hmm.
and as the city was trying to rebuild, and those of us that could went around to help, deliver water or whatever to the people that are, pulling everything they've ever owned out of their destroyed house. That's all that's left is the beams and things in a flood. And what I noticed most of all was it was so weird, the joy. There was this joy of my family's alive, for those who didn't lose human beings.
Yeah.
Not a lot of humans died in that, thank God.
Yeah.
But certainly possession devastation. But there was this sense of joy. My family is alive.
Yeah.
This is just stuff. And there is that reset button, which people joke about all the time, right? If only I could just reset my life. And how did that affect you in terms of the reset button?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because there is almost like this temporary euphoria. And I did feel that, especially, all my friends coming together and everyone coming to help me. And people that I was like, I didn't know you cared that much. Just everywhere people were coming to help, and it was incredible. It was beautiful, and the Red Cross was amazing, by the way. But then we would cry ourselves to sleep every night, not over the stuff, but over our pets. And the fact that we didn't know how we were going to make a living. We were scared because we had 2 little kids. It would have been different if we hadn't had kids, but we were really scared because we had 2 kids to support. We didn't have a place to live. We didn't have jobs. But people just came to the rescue, and the Red Cross bought Troy a new guitar and an amp so that he could start doing gigs right away, which he did. We had friends that booked these big corporate events. They called us right away. We heard we're going to book you on every weekend, every gig we've got, so we were like, we just started working like workhorses every weekend. So we had that because the Red Cross got him the instruments to work, and I had my instrument, which was my voice, luckily.
How did your marriage... Excuse me.
I know both of us are like...
yeah, goodness. I don't know what that's about. Excuse me. How did your marriage throughout this? Did it maintain the stability, or
No, it was tough. We almost didn't make it. So it was a couple of really rough years. And for, not to assign gender roles here, but like for a man, it was really, really hard on his self-esteem to not be able to provide for his family, to feel like he needed to accept charity from others. It was harder for him even than it was for me. And it really took a toll on his self-esteem. And so he got really depressed. And I, because of all my unexamined baggage from my own childhood, the shooting and other things that had happened, it's like, when something like that happened, like a big tragedy, it sort of like breaks open the fault line, and everything else comes up to the surface.
Yeah.
So I was a hot mess, and I was no fun to be with. And so, and the fire was only the beginning of a period of 4 years of just shit luck.
Why? What else?
Oh God, it's all in my book.
Okay.
I could talk to you for hours about it, but I mean, just it was like one thing after the next, getting ripped off, getting evicted from a house that we'd been paying. We finally found a house, and we were paying lease to own, and had paid $14,000 on the down payment on the house, and the owners had been pocketing the money, and we didn't know, and never paid the mortgage. And we got evicted after, so we lost everything again. Anyways, it was a period of 4 years where so many bad things were happening to us. And that's why I call it my book Fire Season, because it was a season of just, we couldn't stop these bad things from happening.
Is your middle name Job or anything?
Right? I mean, well, listen, like I have friends who have lost children. I don't have any problems compared to, if I haven't lost one of my loved ones, I consider myself incredibly lucky.
Sure.
But they were really challenging years that pushed us both to our limits. And there was one point about 4 years after the fire that we were gonna split up, and we almost did. It was really intense. And then we made the decision. I was like, look, I'm miserable with you, and I'm miserable without you. So I'd rather be miserable with you and try to make it better.
Sounds like a good deal, yeah.
Yeah. So, and we did, and we got therapy, and we worked our stuff out, and now actually, in August it'll be our 30-year anniversary.
Good for you.
Yep. And we do great. Like, we don't even, we never fight anymore. We understand when we get triggered, and we
therapy is an exceptional thing to do.
I wish it was mandatory for all human beings, because I feel like our country wouldn't be in the mess they're in if everybody went to therapy. But you just, like, some people are so awful, and you just go, who hurt you as a child? Because
that's
awful.
Where it always comes. I mean, that's where it comes from generally. Yeah.
So, but anyways, we're good now. Thanks for asking.
I'm glad.
It was tough. It was really tough.
And good on you for not, throwing in the towel there. It would have been easy to do. And we live in a culture now, of course, where, the toaster broke, let's get a new toaster.
Yeah.
Where, our grandparents, the toaster broke, well, let's tinker with it until we fix it.
I know.
Which is...
I miss that.
Yeah, that's kind of the...
Yeah.
That's what therapy is. It's tinkering with the toaster.
Oh,
trying to fix
good
it. Good
metaphor. Yeah.
I'm on a roll.
Yeah, you are. I like that. Yeah, we just weren't willing to give up, and it was really hard work. And it wasn't like, I'm going to stay with you until you work your stuff out. It was like, I'm going to work my stuff out to be better for you. We each said that, and we each did our hard work. And when we were happier with ourselves, we got along a lot better.
Amen, sister.
Amen.
It always starts with us.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's astounding. I use the word extraordinary a lot. We can make it a drinking game in this episode. But what a human being is capable of enduring is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's true. There are people all over the world enduring
a lot.
Yeah.
How did your book, Dancing at the Shame Prom, I love the title.
Yeah, that's a good, fun title, isn't it?
This is a compilation.
It's a compilation. It's 27 women writers, including myself and Amy Ferris, who we co-edited. It was our idea to write this book because we were talking on the phone all the time about, like, if only, look how we've been able to overcome our worst shame and turn it into, like, a building block, turn it into our platform, the worst thing that ever happened to us. And, if only everyone could do that. And so we were just thinking about all the, like, extraordinary women that we knew that had done that. And so we were like, let's write a book, let's do this. So there are singers and artists and activists and writers and just all different kinds of women that are telling their story, feminists, telling their stories of how they took the worst thing that ever happened to them and turned it into a strength, Mm-hmm. So it was an incredible project, and I think the whole, like, prom thing that we came
which has its own shame.
Yeah, well, that's what we were thinking about. It's like, who didn't come home the next day from their prom feeling either completely disappointed or ashamed, or it's never...
I didn't go to prom. I was not asked, so I ate ice cream and watched TV.
Well, that was me at homecoming, so... But it's like it's like you always think about, one day I'm going to go to the prom and this is what my dress is going to look like and it's going to be this kind of an evening.
It's the mythology of childhood, sure.
Yeah,
we get so many lovely mythologies that
Yeah.
we're supposed to live up to that are fallacy.
Totally. And so that was a metaphor for life. It's like how we think, how your life's going to turn out, and then here's how it actually turns out. And then what do you do with that, So that's kind of what the title is about.
But it's all women.
It's all women. We felt bad. We felt like we should have done a second edition, but with men's stories. But this was published through a feminist press, Seal Press, so it was all women.
Sure.
Because women's voices haven't had equal footing
historically.
Yeah.
So I think we're getting a little bit of a toe in the water there.
Yeah, we are now.
Maybe 2 toes.
But this is what this came out 2012. So it's,
although I think I would be interested in reading a book about shame from the male perspective, because I think it is the unspoken, stepchild kept in the closet under the stairs, below the basement.
Yeah, I agree.
And this is part of the problem. It's like what you said. Nobody would talk about your brother being shot.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about shame. Nobody talks about fear or doubt because they're considered weaknesses.
Exactly.
And yet, if I walked into a room of 100 people and asked every single man and woman in the room and child, what is something you feel shame about? There'd be an answer.
Yeah, but they probably wouldn't tell you. But
they probably wouldn't.
They would have something.
But in my scenario, they're very open.
Yeah, in your scenario.
But I'm just saying that we all carry.
Yeah. Of course.
The mantle of shame, whether it's self-inflicted, given to us by a parent or a family or religion or the television or the magazines we read.
Exactly, yeah.
My God, it's a bombardment.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
My car, as I joke, here I am in LA. I have a Scion. It's a toaster, speaking of toasters. But it's a workhorse. It's paid for. It carries my artwork. It's great. But, I go to some of the parties here, and everyone's driving Jaguars and BMWs and Audis and really, really nice cars that they're leasing for gobs and gobs of money.
Yes.
And I have to check myself because the shame monster, peeks into the window while I'm happily sitting there enjoying my experience and says, "Psst,
yeah.
Scion? Really? Really?"
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Oh, I know.
You have a book you're working on, Better Off Without You. Is it coming out? It's about to come out?
So my agent's been pitching it for the last 2 months, and it's a really, it's a nerve-wracking ride. Just waiting. It's
fiction.
Yeah, it's my first novel.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it's about a woman. It starts on 9/11. She's a Wall Street, mogul, basically. And her life is a hot mess. I mean, she's on the verge of checking out. I mean, it's bad. Things are bad for her. And because of all this stuff that's going on, she misses her train into work that morning, and that's the morning that the planes hit the building. And so she runs toward the building. She tries to get to her friends, and she can't get through. And then the buildings crumble, and she's badly injured. And then as she's going over the Brooklyn Bridge with all of the people soaked in white ash, and she keeps trying her cell phone. I don't know if you remember, but back then nobody could get cell phone signal because everyone was trying to use their cell phone. So nobody could get through. And she keeps trying to get through to tell her husband she's alive, tell somebody she's alive, and she can't. And then she finally realizes, everyone thinks I'm dead. So maybe I'm just dead. And she just chucks her cell phone off the Brooklyn Bridge, and she gets on a Greyhound bus and heads to Canada. And it's like everything that happens once she's in this new place. And basically it's anywhere you go, there you are. So you take your stuff with you, and she has to confront a lot of stuff. She meets all these new characters. She tries on this new life, and she has to figure out what to do with the mess she's made.
Sounds like a good book.
It's a
sounds like a good movie too.
It's a really interesting
here's to your option.
Concept. Well, it was funny because I could never stop thinking about that after 9/11. Like, what if you didn't make it to work that morning, but everyone thought you were dead? What if you wanted everyone to think you were dead?
The reset button.
Walk away. Nobody would ever know. Just walk away. I always thought, I wonder if any people did that. I mean, we'll never know, right? So I thought, what a perfect way to escape from it. It just was an interesting concept to me. And what would you do? Because I have faced a blank slate in my life. what would you do if you went to another country, just became a different person and just started over, and nobody knew you, that nobody knew your history or what you were about, and you just decided to become someone new? What would that feel like? What would it look like? So I had a lot of fun exploring that, like, ooh, what if she meets this person, then what would happen? And what if I put her in this situation, what would happen? And it was fun.
What do you think you would do if you did that?
Oh, I would never do it because I have kids, and I'm like...
Let's take the kids out.
And my husband, who I love so much. I don't know. If I had no attachments to anybody and I started my life over, what an interesting question. I think I would live a quiet life in the woods and be a painter and write books. Yeah. I don't know. Who knows what you'd actually do?
Who knows?
I'd have to make a living, so I'd probably end up working in a bank and not ever have time to paint.
Well, unless your uncles, came through you and taught you how to be one with the animals, and then you would, you'd be...
Train wolves. Yeah. I'd train wolves. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd have an owl.
Holly, how can people find you and your books? So we have Dancing at the Shame Prom. We have Fire Season upcoming. Better Off Without You, which will come out. We'll see when.
Yeah.
Well, people can keep up with you on your website.
I have a website, hollyedexter.net.
And Holly is spelled interesting.
HOLLYE, Dexter, DEXTER.
Yes.
I'm on everything because I'm also a social media director for an organization.
Oh, so. Yeah, I almost forgot. One of the things that you do is the Art for Kids. Is it Art Soul Kid Art for Kids?
Yeah,
what is this?
I did that for 10 years, and we lost our funding. And that I know. And when the economy collapsed in 2008, we lost our funding. But I worked with teenagers in foster care. A lot of them were on probation or had drug issues, and so we did all kinds of. We did songwriting, we did writing, we did art, we did graffiti art, we made movies, and it was just exploring all forms of self-expression as an alternative to expressing yourself in a negative way that's going to get you put in juvie,
Sure.
So it was great. We'd worked together for 2 months, and a lot of the kids I'm still in touch with today. They're all grown up. But yeah, I did that for the better part of a decade. And
I'm sorry to hear that it's ended.
I did too, because it was probably the best thing I ever did in my life, like work-wise. It really was. It was really a beautiful chapter. It was called Art and Soul.
Art and Soul.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, it was.
Maybe it'll
cool.
get revitalized somehow.
Yeah,
because it sounds like a fantastic idea.
It really was. It really was. So yeah, I hope so.
Well, I'll put links for your books and all your contacts.
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook.
All the places.
All those places. Google me.
All the places we love to hate to love.
I know.
Holly, thank you.
Thank you so much.
One more tip to the drink. It was an extraordinary experience talking with you.
Thank you. It was extraordinary talking with you. And I just want to say my last thing. Everybody get carbon monoxide detectors, please.
Absolutely. I'll put links so that people can get those on Amazon, because I do that. It's an ad-free podcast, so I do at the Amazon portal. But on the links page, there's always books and things and items you can get through Amazon. So get your carbon monoxide tester warning bell things.
Yes, please.
They're important. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget, rate and review Hey Human on iTunes. Thanks. Bye.